Honestly, I became aware of Alex Saab through my parishioner, Dr. Julio de Carvalho, who is a resident of Lowell, Massachusetts, who is also a professor in in Massachusetts. He is my parishioner. He came to the church. He called me. He told me what was happening in June 12, 2020, when the Cuban government did kidnap, sequestered the ambassador of Venezuela, Alex Saab. As we all know, Alex Saab is a diplomatic in a special mission and to the African Union. And as you said in the introduction, he was in his way to Iran to buy goods for the people of Venezuela, like oil, some food, medicine, etc. So I came to know the second time around about Alex Saab through the International Action Center. And believe it or not, I was on my vacation in Orlando, Florida. 3 days shy to my end of vacation, I was asked to stop and to come to Boston to get on the plane to come to Key Bird. And as a man of compassion, I believe in social justice. I believe in the humanitarian needs of others. So I gave up my vacation, and here I am in Key Bird with a mission to free Alex Saab. And and I'm a friend of Venezuelans for many years. I have, again, through the International Action Center, I became one of their clergy, especially in the Boston area. I did have the opportunity to be with President Maduro in his visit to New York City during the UN meetings and so forth. And I did have a great relationship with Venezuela when Hugo Chavez was very sick, was about to die. We had an ecumenical prayer for him actually in one of the churches in Boston. I was invited to be one of the religious leader on that. So I became to be one of the followers.
Thanks for that question. You're right. Thank you, Ted, for that question. So I'm with the Task Force on the Americas. We're a human rights organization, 35 years in, old, and very early in the development of the Task Force on the Americas, we discovered that to be consistently for human rights, when we spoke to people like in delegations like this, spoke to people on the ground, we learned that to be a consistent humanitarian, one had to be a consistent anti-imperialist. The two were wedded together. And this example of the judicial, extrajudicial overreach of the U.S. empire here in Cabo Verde is an example of the overreach of U.S. imperialism. So beyond the issue of Mr. Saab, the individual, is a larger question of making the world safe for all nations, for medium-sized nations like Venezuela, and for small nations like Cabo Verde, who are very, very vulnerable to the machinations of the United States. I'll give you just one example. It, 3 days from now, it'll be a year when Mr. Saab was abducted by the authorities here. He was on a flight from Caracas to Tehran, and it was a humanitarian mission to get needed supplies because the United States was blockading the food and medicine coming into Venezuela. And he was going to Iran to make a legal international business deal. The United States, his plane had to make a routine refueling stop. He called, his pilot called Morocco, Algeria, and Tunis, and Tunisia. And all three countries refused to let planes land. And by some sort of orchestration, which we assumed that the United States was behind, he had to land in Cabo Verde. As soon as he landed in Cabo Verde, he hadn't gotten off the plane. He was seized and put in prison. And his crime was bringing humanitarian aid. This is it's Saab is being persecuted, but really the crime here is the overreach of U.S. imperialism. Thanks.
So, all I we have Sarah Flanders with us really out there. First, I want to go to William or William. This work, this reality, means a great deal to. I'm wondering if you could describe the work you're doing, petition for Alex, and also be here at another delegation. Comment on how Venezuela in particular are trying to keep this pressure on. Uh, Thank you very much. Basically, uh, we are for Venezuelan people, there's arrest, the illegal arrest of Alex is simple another attack on the United States, trying to suffocate the Venezuelan economy, kill Venezuelan people of starvation. The reality is that Alex Saab was basically working in behalf of the Venezuelan government for over 10 years. And you know, all the networks that the Venezuelan government has been using, medicine, food, confidential stuff for Venezuelan people. And that's why the United States stopped an attack human rights that Venezuelan people direct attack and those illegal sanctions. And, and that's why they want get other tab and state to get the information of all those networks that have been created to really avoid the sanctions. That's the main issue here. Yes, we are basically organizing another delegation soon. I think that Dan Kovalik is with us, listening to us and watching us. He will be traveling to Cabo Verde. He is a writer, an activist, a law professor. He's will be traveling and yet there. And also Max Blumenthal is also getting to Cabo Verde. Also, he's from Sayuca, a great song. Already has done published two different pieces about what have been happening in Cabo Verde. And also, we are getting in touch with some people from Africa. We have an ex-member of the African National Congress that is traveling to Cabo Verde, but also we are trying to get Nelson Mandela's sons there, and we have other people on standby. So we still don't have to at the end to be traveling, but this is the we have right now, and we have other people that want to travel in the next. Probably we could have the delegation in the next delegation. This is a very important issue. You have been able to see closely what have been happening down there. The delegation has been very successful. Have been putting a lot of pressure on Cabo Verdean government officials, but also have been creating a lot of noise, not only in Cabo Verde, but also in South America, in the state. And that's the most important thing. Make the case for Alex know by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Comrade. We appreciate sharing with us. I now want to return to our delegation and ask my comrade Sarah Flanders from the International Action Center. Sarah, your delegation has been in country for about a week now, if I'm not mistaken. Can you talk about what you have been able to accomplish so far?
Yeah, well, so many things. Let me open by saying that solidarity and people's movements working together is a powerful force. And you could see it and feel it in the past weeks. Really, we're a weapon for justice and for change. And when we work together, we can break the silence and repression and fear. Thousands of people signing petitions. This was a campaign initiated really by William Kamakaro's effort. And then it combined the Alliance for Global Justice and the Task Force on the Americas and many other groups, including the International Action Center. There's a legal team that has been working tirelessly for a year, filing one brief after another, successfully, and yet ignored and pushed aside by the US. There's the Venezuelans who are pushing and acting consciously, and there are people here on the ground in Cabo Verde. So this is a wide international movement, and it is gaining strength and momentum. Just to say, even in the passing of resolutions, the working class in the US is today from every country. And so this became a workers' struggle when the Boston School Bus Drivers Union, many of them from Cabo Verde, passed a unanimous resolution, Local 8751 of the steelworkers, for the freedom of Alex Saab. They put out petitions, they put out publicity. And when we were joined by Bishop Teixeira from Boston with the Cabo Verdean community, it really gave weight because he's been such a leader in many campaigns in the Boston area for years. So it was a coming together of all different forces, and more are joining us. You know, you can look at every crisis and think how powerful is your opponent and how small you are. Or you can organize and mobilize and think how powerful you are and how powerful the workers are and our movement can be. So we're a force when we're united, and this has certainly been shown this week. We couldn't have done any of the things we did in Cabo Verde without an outside team that was really behind us. Now, there is a crime. There's a big crime, and it's U.S. sanctions. It's a starving of 39 countries, 15 of them countries in Africa, and it's especially the starving of the most prosperous country of Latin America, Venezuela, that was providing for all of its people and now has been just cut down by U.S. sanctions. Venezuela has a right to feed its people. I'm also part of the Sanctions Kill campaign because that is what U.S. sanctions does. It's a real instrument of terror. So standing up to it all around the world is becoming more and more important. This delegation, okay, it was 6 grueling days, long flights. It's not an easy place to connect to. And you could say, what did we gain? Did we gain the freedom of Alex Saab or his return to Venezuela? We were not even able to meet with Alex Saab. That's to be honest. So what did we accomplish? Well, this delegation was successful in highlighting, in drawing attention, in exposing that, first of all, Alex Saab is imprisoned. They claimed he was just living under a very comfortable house arrest. Not true at all. Armed guards, snipers, automatic weapons, so on. So exposing the imprisonment and representing a growing world movement that together is more and more raising that Alex Saab is a people's hero, that despite 1 year of intense legal struggle, this filing of motions, many of them successful in Cape Verdean courts and West Africa courts, in the UN Human Rights Committee, really it's quite incredible. In the media, there was total silence, just around the abduction. It was unknown. It's like secret rendition of years ago, another US criminal policy. Now it's the abduction of a diplomat, an enormous crime, a new, far more outrageous step of US lawlessness. So helping to break the news on this case is so important, raising an awareness in the Cabo Verdean community. More than half of the community lives outside this country, lives particularly in Boston to Rhode Island, and their voice has become increasingly important. Raising the awareness here. Cabo Verde has a strategic location. They're not aware of it themselves all too often, but US policymakers are. They're pulling Cabo Verde into the NATO US commanded military alliance. Those agreements and contracts have already been sent. What does that mean for the people here? It doesn't mean a better life. It means militarism, repression, the coordination of their police force with the most corrupt terrorist police force in the world. And for this, the US pays pennies to the population here. I think we've also challenged the perception of Alex Saab, charged with money laundering. Now, and being a corrupt businessman. If he was a corrupt businessman, he could have sold out immediately to the highest bidder, and that's the US. The fact that he didn't, stood on principle despite torture, despite solitary confinement and death threats, all of that together really shows that he is absolutely committed to the people of Venezuela, to their well-being, to their future. The United Nations Human Rights Committee's report just yesterday really takes this a step further in ordering the release of Alex Saab, in saying that he must immediately, he is suffering from cancer, hasn't been treated or seen in a year. He must immediately be able to be seen by his doctors, by oncologists of his choice. Now, what did we do in 6 days? We took these reports, every one of them, to the foreign minister, to the prosecutor general, to the prime minister, and to the US embassy. We were on the ground, knocking on doors, making as much noise as we possibly could. And I think all of that together with the next delegation coming soon, as William described, and our continued attention, continued struggle on this issue will make a huge difference. We got to stand with the people of Venezuela and stand with the people of Capo Verde, who did not kidnap Alex Saab. The U.S. did that. They should not bear the blame for this. And so our unity is a tremendous force in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And once again, I would like to everyone listening and watching. It doesn't take any longer than 1 minute. Also, I would encourage update application or Facebook, Twitter. You know, I have a question. So if everyone wants to come up together, one person specifically
Yep, this is one of the many examples of the long reach of the U.S. imperialist arm. So what happened was that on June 12, 2020, Mr. Saab's plane landed in Cabo Verde, diverted there, and he was arrested. The next day, the Interpol red alert was sent, which ordered his extradition at the request of the United States government. So there was this absolute collusion right there. But that also shows that his initial arrest was completely bogus. There was no basis for his arrest because there was no Interpol red alert at the time. It was the pressure of the world's hegemon on a very small country. Cabo Verde is one of the smallest countries, both in terms of population and in terms of geographic area. And it's very difficult for a country like that to resist U.S. imperialism. So as North Americans, we're very reluctant to blame the Cabo Verdean authorities for the imprisonment of Alex Saab. It is the actions of the United States which they are trying to resist.
Well, every step of this is illegal, is criminal. Alex Saab or any of the countries trading with each other, when and why is that illegal? Had nothing to do with the U.S. Alex Saab had never been to the U.S., wasn't engaged in any trade with the United States. This was between Venezuela and Iran. And yet it is this determination to dominate every economic transaction on the globe today and to turn off and on absolutely essential supplies, to use starvation and lack of medical care during a time of pandemic as a conscious, calculated weapon. I mean, that's the crime. That's the crime. And if you go for that level of lawlessness, then everything else becomes possible. If you're willing to commit crimes really that amount to mass murder, we can never forget that the U.S. bragged, they never apologized, that they caused within 4 years the death of 500,000 children in Iraq based on the sanctions. That was that famous Madeleine Albright quote. She didn't apologize for it, not 1 ounce. So they are willing to commit massive crimes, massive murder in order to dominate the world. And countries have every right, they have every obligation to satisfy the needs of their own people.
Okay, so the charges, um, there's about 8 charges, and without getting into the weeds on those 8 charges, I would say that the maximum legal penalty that Mr. Saab faces if he were to be extradited to the United States is 160 years prison, which, by the way, makes it illegal for him to be extradited from Cabo Verde, because that is, by Cabo Verde law, that is considered a life-threatening sentence or a life sentence. And I want to put that into context here, because in 2019, there was a very unfortunate incident here on the island of Santiago, where we are in Cabo Verde. And this reportedly rogue military person, a soldier, massacred 11 people, shot them dead. That person got 35 years in prison. Mr. Saab faces 160 years of prison for bringing food, medicine, fuel to a country that's fine.
Well, I think Roger did a good job by answering, really putting the numbers, you know, and what he's been charged with and so forth. For those of us who live in the United States, it's not something new may happen. He's not the first person I, Sarah, and others have fight for. And I'm sure while he was on this earth, these big monsters are going to keep doing what they're doing. They're well trained, they're all prepared financially, and so forth, so physically. And the sad thing about it is when they get countries poor, vulnerable, like my country, Cape Verde. Um, and the unfortunate thing about it is although we talk a democratic country, that's not true at all. The, there are a lot of people, especially in the government, who believes that America is their salvation, their paradise, is where they're going to get all the goodies for their lives. But for all of us, for those of us who study in America, the history and all that goods, we know that's not true at all, because we see how our Black Americans, brothers and sisters live in America, their conditions, so forth, how they are treated. And me, myself, here in the ground, knowing the language, the culture, I came for education purpose to let them know they're making a big mistake. Although they are humble people, they are vulnerable people, they're poor people, um, but those who are in charge are making big mistakes. And they tell me, they say, Bishop, our country is sold. You know, this neocolonialism, this new type of being slaves of the U.S. imperialism, of China, of Russia, of even Lebanon, I'm sorry, and in some European countries, and it's unbelievable. Those are the people who are in charge, who have all the benefits of this nation, the small 9 islands. In that aspect of it, the U.S. is using their vulnerability, their poverty. Yes, I'm saying that the U.S. is taking advantage of their poverty and their lack of knowledge. What U.S. government is, the strategic plans for Africa, for those countries like Africa, because Cabo Verde is a strategically military a place that U.S. has been looking for many, many years, perhaps before I was born, you know, so they can be able to control the whole Africa. And we are here really to open the eyes of people. You know, some of us who are outside, we understand that. Most of them do don't understand that. But in other aspect of it, I have a lot of hope for the young people because some young people they know what's going on. They march with us today. They be speak with us today, and they have their eyes and ears open to these U.S. games, you know, and so forth. But you know, I believe our mission here this week was very successful. We gained a lot, making noises, knock the doors like two or three times, make them feel uncomfortable. It speaks volumes. And as a matter of fact, you know, I just received an email just now as we're speaking from the Human Rights Division, um, uh, saying Bishop Texera, you know, blah blah blah. But I'm sorry, you know, the president, this is Zaida Freitas is busy, will not be able to meet with you. But just for that answer, because I sent an email before I came to Cape Verde, and while I was here, I did send an email. So finally, you know, and I'm sure the decision of UN yesterday is making them moving fast. And the media is saying that was a blow in the face of the Cape Verdean government and also in the US government, okay, for the UN to say we need to start doing the right thing right now.
The recruiting system.
Also relates to over how the very mission. I would ask for a donation and encourage people to donate to my.center.com/donate. But we have a question for people.
Well, the biggest thing that people can do who are listening now, who are connecting, is to push forward to sign that petition, because every one of those goes as a message to the Prime Minister of Capo Verde, to the President of Capo Verde, and to President Biden, who's really responsible for this and could reverse it in an instant, even if it was initiated or begun under the Trump administration, but it's really U.S. policy. So hopefully you'll show that again. We have it here as part of our graphic on the wall. I think that's the big thing. I think programs like this and the programs that are happening, whether it's Pelisur or other groups, or the report back that we'll do when we get back to the States, every one of those things, spreading it, explaining this, and including Alex Saab's name in every campaign and struggle for political prisoners. We know, we've seen, we have fought for political prisoners in the U.S. who jailed 30, 50, and more years, really life sentences, whether it's Mumia Abu Jamal or Leonard Peltier, Afia Siddiqui, sentenced to 89 years. Really and those who are unnamed, largest prison population in the world. So we know the horror that faces Alex Saab if he is extradited and brought to the U.S. He won't get justice. The simplest person does not get justice in U.S. courts, and those that the U.S. is targeting never get justice. So I would really urge people to do the petition signing, the meetings, the putting on programs like this, holding other webinars and programs. We got to figure out how to be in the streets, how to take these petitions. Are already making plans in Boston, I believe, and Bishop Tesoro may know more on that, to go to the consulate of Capo Verde. I think they're beginning plans to take these petitions to Washington. So many plans are just beginning, but it all has to do with people's mobilizations and at the same time working in coordination with this very serious and committed legal team.
I just like to add, I mean, coming here to free Alex Saab, we have learned a lot of other things. And as a humanitarian delegation, we looked into all the things that really is the consequence of the presence of U.S. imperialism in the islands. And there are three things that I'm very concerned. It's with the new embassy that U.S. is is going to build here in this capital. The high school they're building from the students here in change of the location where the U.S. want to build a new embassy, and also the presence of police officers from Boston, Massachusetts, which is my state, um, that are training police here in Cape Verde, and in now dealing as a delegation of the police, I notice that culture, that tension, how the police now are interacting with us, not only foreigners, but also the young people on the street. And I had a lot of concerns. So as we go back to America, we will, locally, I'll talk with the people, and we're planning, in all these issues, really to bring to the attention of the Cape Verdeans who are in diaspora in America, and also the local union, the school bus drive union, especially on the issue of the police officers of Boston, training the police here in Cape Verde. Um, it's misery. This is a country who is known for peace. Cape Verde, there was never a fight in Cape Verde. There was never war in Cape Verde. But it looks like the way the officers, where the military are, that they're ready for war. And at the end of the day, we're going to see what happened in Syria, what's happened in Syria, in Palestine, and other countries, Afghanistan, Iraq. That's what I'm afraid of. And uh, and uh, and we need to be careful. And that's why during this week, um, I learned a lot, and my eyes was open. And as a religious leader, I'm very concerned. And one thing I want to put on the record is the religious leader of this country, of these 9 islands, are quiet, are silenced, you know, in all this injustice, And some people are no longer saying Cape Verde is a democratic country, but as a dictator country, because they're afraid of expressing themselves. They're afraid they're going to be attacked, put in jail, and so forth, being tortured. And we as a delegation had that experience when we went to the residence of Alex Saab, and it's a big concern. And the other thing we're going to do when we go back, also we'll meet with our Congress, the congressmen, and also the senators, Elizabeth Warren and others, to talk about these U.S. Activities in the island, because they should know exactly the details and how what's going on. And also, we're going to organize a march to the Cape Verdean consulate in Quincy, Massachusetts. It's going to be symbolic because they're not coming out to talk to us. They're silenced. And also the possibility, hopefully through the International Action Center of DC, the local, to organize a demonstration in front of Cape Verde Embassy in DC. I think will be a great thing for us to do, and move on, because this is not the end. This is just the beginning of the fight to free Cape Verdeans from the hand of U.S. imperialism.
Well, I think the big thing is to refuse to take no or silence as an answer, and to just be absolutely persistent, uh, to assume that the door is not going to be open, you're not going to get a welcome, and you know what? That's not important. We want them to make sure they know it's registered, we've signed in that we're there, and that we don't agree with the policy, and we're leaving a message about that. I think the most important thing we did was to visit to the attempted visit to the place where Alex Saab was being held. And I think other delegations will also, because the excuse that's given here is that even our motions, we filed very important habeas corpus motions in the Cabo Verde Supreme Court. And what was the purpose of those motions? To again raise the legal arguments, even though the courts have already said that they won't accept it because Alex Saab isn't in prison, that he is under what they call a house arrest. So challenging this image of house arrest was very important. And then going to file again the writ of habeas corpus. The habeas corpuses had been filed beforehand. So working on that both with the legal team, with the forces who have been doing the defense all this time, and at the same time, uh, you know, being willing to confront, the powers that be. We did not know when we took off whether even we would be able to disembark. But again, that has a lot to do with the level of support that already had been created. So I think those are important steps. We met with the Venezuelan ambassador, and he described he's a diplomat to this country. He's a representative. The very fact that he couldn't meet with a fellow diplomat. We met with the legal team. That's very important, and they've given us a great deal of their time. So I expect other delegations will find other grounds. There are new areas still to explore. We did as much as we could in our short time here, but I think keeping the international pressure on and keeping on the local pressure right here, that is having an impact.
Yes, if I may, I just want to maybe summarize what I think are some of the two key issues, and that the issues that we don't want to lose sight of. This is both a humanitarian issue of sovereignty. And those two issues are intertwined. And let me just go back into a little bit of history for Cabo Verde. Cabo Verde is off the Atlantic coast of Africa, 500 miles from Senegal, and it was uninhabited. It was discovered by Portuguese mariners, and Christopher Columbus landed here in his third journey across the Atlantic. So it's a relatively new country in terms of people, and it went through a horrific colonial period. Given this location, it was very important to transatlantic trade. It was a major coaling station. It was also a major station for the trade items, which is one of the great abominations. This was the center of slave trade. And the Cape Verdean people and the people of Guinea-Bissau rose up against that colonialism. It was led by the great African liberation leader Amilcar Cabral. Unfortunately, he got assassinated just a few months before the liberation movement declared the sovereignty of this country from the colonial masters. That was in 1971. It wasn't until 1975 the country has been fighting against neocolonialism for its own sovereignty. Now it's the United States, which is neo-colonial master, and the humanitarian violators must be open. So I really urge you folks to sign that petition, get other people to sign that petition, get those people to sign the petition. We need to free our.
Yeah, I wonder. How does it work? Canada.
I like to say also that we had the opportunity to meet with a former minister here and deputy. Um, was a good and an eye-open session. Um, and someone who from the beginning started to talk on the radios against against the against the people in charge right now. The party who's in charge is NPD. It's the movement for democracy here in Cape Verde, and and the way he described us what was going on and how the government intimidates the people, not even to be able to think about what was going on and so on. So despite all the silence, we had people. We had people who talked to us off the record. I had a lot of people who called me, young people who talked to me one on one, and I do feel I'm living with some hope and faith that better days will come. And I only, as a man of faith, I would say, on the pray and wish that there'll be no more need of any delegations to come. I hope by the end of this week that Alex Saab will be going home. And if that does not happen, we'll come back again. And we'll continue to fight for the liberation, not only Alex Saab, but so many who are incarcerated in the US illegally, but because the power to be and so forth. So, again, thank you. I really appreciate the International Action Center for this opportunity once again to be with you all here and also back home. That will continue to do that. As we say, a luta continua, a vitória certa.
Till then, once again, thank you. Incredible work. Doing, keep doing, great balance, great couple, great Alex.
Obrigado, gente, por assistir o